Hello and welcome to Deathmatch Cinema. I am Will of Will's Game Talk, and I'm joined by my good friend and co-host Link.
Hello.
Who hosts Tubbin and Chuggin on
do.
YouTube. So today we're doing a battle royale of battle royales for our second episode. We're going to get to where both films succeed. I think that's going to be potentially the place where the most interesting discussion comes out. But was there anything that stood out to you watching Battle Royale earlier today about either film?
Well, I mean, you can clearly see, I think this one, the differences between, because I think we're talking mainly about Hunger Games and Battle Royale here today, right?
I might have oversold it with Battle Royale of Battle Royale. It really is just Battle Royale and the Hunger Games.
Yeah. But so between the two, right, there's, I guess the differences struck out to me more than the similarities, even though there are definitely a lot of similarities, but they feel like very different types of movies, despite the like bunch of kids killing each other as sort of the main premise. I don't know if that came out to you as well.
I feel similarly. I feel like the focuses of both movies, even though the subject obviously doesn't get more similar, it's a death game. I feel like they're very different films.
Because I mean, one I think is clearly going for that young adult dystopian feel with like a true protagonist, a hero's journey, right, almost in a sense. And Battle Royale is more just like, yeah, okay, it's almost kind of like a slasher film in a sense that like there is a lot of focus, I think, on the kills and the sort of the crazy blood splattering and stuff. But
right.
There's no like I guess I don't want to say point, but like clear sort of underlying like this is what we're doing here. It really feels almost like a random collection of stuff. So I was actually kind of curious after this to go check out Battle Royale 2, which the guy who directed this one started, right, but kind of died in the middle of it.
Of course.
To see like what if that was going for more of like Friday the 13th or Halloween, like infinite kind of sequels for just we're just gonna keep doing these battle royales.
Right.
Or if there was never, I guess, something more that was going to be added to it.
I thought Battle Royale was interesting structurally. More than Hunger Games, it felt like it was structured like a Steven Spielberg like children's film to me, because you have a really innocent protagonist who he's not really like the most proficient in any one thing, and he follows a pretty plain trajectory, and he's just noble. That's his shtick. So he really felt like a children's protagonist to me, and Hunger Games felt like a more serious revolutionary story. Obviously, it's also adapted from a book. It's not just a screenplay, but it seemed like they were trying to have a revolutionary story that feels real, yet is still like not so brutal that a young adult couldn't enjoy it. And I think you hinted at some dissonance in Battle Royale where, you've got a simple protagonist. It's got a lot of, in the filmmaking itself, it feels a lot like a slasher, yet the children, like they're children. It's really aged down in some way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the age in general, like it might just be a cultural thing, but they definitely felt more like kids in Battle Royale to me. I think like the ages of some of the people in Hunger Games, like the actors were probably like in their 20s. It didn't really feel like kids killing each other to me. And there was sort of a range, I think it's like 12 to 18 that the kids
it's not just straight
in
15.
The games can be, but like, yeah, it really felt more like these are children.
Yeah, in Battle Royale, I agree with you with them feeling like naive, like children. It seemed, even though the BR law was a rule of their society, it really seemed to catch everyone off guard in a way where in the world of the Hunger Games, every single child they're having nightmares about this from the moment they turn, 9. Like, am I going to get chosen when I'm 12? So it felt more integrated in the society.
I wanted to talk about that because it was somewhat unclear as to the whole Battle Royale, the BR Act or whatever law, because there have clearly been Battle Royales before this. There, like, it was sort of the guy who was in the previous one was talking about how he was in that one. And then you have people that do like kind of sign up for it. But it doesn't feel like anybody is aware that it's like a thing. Like the kids are all like, what do you mean? What is this BR thing? Like, or is it just so dissident that the kids are so like gone from reality, they don't understand this is happening? It's not like broadcast on TV or anything like the Hunger Games is, but they still have the big control station where they're still monitoring everything. So I guess I don't understand the purpose of the law in this society. What is it supposed to do?
So reading the translation literally, they say it's a disciplinary thing because children are growing up more unruly. I mean, that's a pretty paper thin justification for this particular thought experiment. So I got the impression, and this is just hugely reading into it because they don't detail it much, that it was a punishment for certain groups of students, and everyone thought they wouldn't be considered so bad as to be a part of the battle royale. Yet they needed the specific specific rules explained to them. So I don't know, you know, and I'm not sure the movie's interested in making us know that, because it seems like they're really trying to get at you feeling these characters' shock of the horrors of it all.
Yeah, I think structurally that's one of the places the movie immediately kind of loses me, is because it starts out with like the text explaining like, oh, and this is how bad things in Japan are. We have a 15%
Right.
unemployment rate or whatever. And so we're gonna have a BR, and then it like kind of shows the winner of one, I guess the girl like smiling kind of
Yeah,
psychotically.
she's creepy.
And then it immediately kind of just cuts away to like this other group of kids who are on their field trip and they have no idea that a BR is a thing. And then their old teacher shows up, like kind of running it. So
Right.
at first, like I was kind of like, is this just this guy like getting revenge? Did he like figure out a way to hire a bunch of dudes to act as soldiers and he's like going to kill the class that he hated? But obviously that isn't true, because we were introduced at the BR Act at the beginning. So it is a real thing. But I don't understand why the kids are shocked by it if it's supposed to be a real thing. It's just kind of a weird, clumsy kind of setup to get into it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I didn't think it was the cleanest setup, but at the same time, they spent noticeably less time setting up the framework to begin the game. There's some interplay between some of the students and the teacher that seemed excessive, especially because, like, it just seemed, I guess excessive is the wrong word, but they didn't feel like they had a place to me there, because those characters don't impact Shuya, the lead, the main character, and his little pod during the game very much. They sort of serve to show what a POS the teacher is, and how he's abusive towards students, but they don't really go beyond that.
Yeah, so that's why I guess what the main difference of Battle Royale versus Hunger Games to me that I'm seeing, or that I see as having watched them, is that one of them is like a sort of very focused, intent story telling this like government oppression, revolution, all this kind of stuff, and then Battle Royale is like a slasher film. Like, because of the way that it's set up, or lack of the way that it's set up, it just kind of feels like a bunch of ideas thrown together as more than like an actual, I guess, screenplay. That's kind of my biggest criticism of it. It just feels like its whole point is it just wants us to watch 2 hours of kids on an island killing each other, but it doesn't know how to get there. So it just kind of like does something for 5 minutes at the beginning and then tells us, okay, let's just go.
So going back through, I published a review on YouTube and TikTok of this film a little while ago, and going back through that intro that feels like 5 minutes is actually like 25 minutes.
Is it really?
It takes surprisingly long to get into the Battle Royale game. Battle Royale struck me as silly in a way that Hunger Games didn't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, silly in like the sense that I don't buy that it's actually a possible future. It just feels like a weird like thing because of how sort of unset up it all is. Like I just don't understand why the kids would kill each other at all, or why they're aware that there is a thing that they could be having to kill each other. Like, it feels like it would be a lot more present in their society, like it is in Hunger Games.
It certainly felt like that was lack of or less of a focus. And I have not read Battle Royale. It too is based on a book, but this one to me felt like more the movie's movie. It felt more like a screenplay in a traditional sense because of the innocent characterization, and there's one antagonist, whereas the Hunger Games like shows you that there are clearly issues with the society that are sort of more systemic. And you could say the president is the big bad, but he's inherited this weird system that he's pro, but Katniss never opposes him directly. Whereas Battle Royale
in the sequels, but yeah.
Absolutely. We're just sticking to this one film. Like, there's not a central figure representing the authority in the same way that Kitano is in this film. And I got the impression that part of why the Battle Royale game didn't make sense is because it didn't make sense as a form of punishment, and that mirrored Kitano's aimlessness. Like, Kitano spends half this movie complaining on the cell phone about his daughter and eating cookies, like looking depressed, surrounded by military men. This is not a
just
focused
like on the
man.
couch.
Yeah, on the couch. He's not a focused man. He's a sad, sort of stupid man.
Which is, again, it's unclear why he's in that position. Like, why is like a disgraced 7th grade teacher running the kill all the children government act? I don't get it.
Well, it's not clear he's disgraced. He was just attacked, so he gave it up a little while.
He resigned, but like, I guess there's a little bit with the main girl Noriko at the end, right? Where
a dream sequence.
The dream sequence of whether or not it was like actually a dream or like based on a thing that actually happened to them. But it looked like they might have been like at least somewhat friends, because he drew that fucking weird picture of her.
Oh yeah, he had that weird painting where she was Jesus. badass
The
and
only one
good.
with her head.
Yeah, the only one with her head on.
So unclear if there was like any kind of he was getting in trouble for inappropriate relationships with students or whatever, or if the kids were just like evil now, and that's just the way that the book and the movie kind of want to represent kids. Either way, why the dude is running the program is unclear to me. It just feels like it should be like a general of some kind.
I think in a literal sense, I agree with you, but I took the ridiculousness and like the unabashed cruelty to mean like a dysfunctional bureaucracy. I thought that this is an evil empire that's made of dumb people. They're not the empire of Star Wars. They're not efficient or effective. They don't know what to do. They have a problem and they're approaching it the wrong way, and they're culling children in a really brutal way. So I didn't think that was really to be taken seriously. I thought every time there was a government bureaucracy, they were essentially like lampooning the diet.
Okay, I kind of see it.
But I could be giving it too much credit. I mean, I walked away from this experience really liking Hunger Games and not liking Battle Royale that much, making, last episode's version of myself an idiot.
Yeah, I mean, I do think Hunger Games is probably the superior overall movie, even if it probably takes a lot of credit from Battle Royale. The authors claim she'd never heard of it, which isn't that unbelievable. Is kind of like a small Japanese film that kind of has since gained a cult
It
following.
didn't have distribution in the US till 2010, which is actually part of why I think we might find it confusing. Toei does do American distribution. They're a big company. They're a big film group. And they sold up the rights, 10 years after the fact because they didn't want to be sued and they didn't want to be given a bunch of poo by Americans who had delicate sensibilities. So we don't necessarily, I can't really speak to the smaller company and the smaller distributors' quality, but we might be getting a different caliber of translation that we would have gotten had it been distributed by Toei.
That's fair enough. I know Tarantino said it was one of his favorite films, and I'm
I
pretty
can
sure that
see
was,
why.
yeah, I think that was fairly close to when it came out. So it's possible it was like in that kind of just sort of some people knew about it, and there were probably ways to watch it, but it was something you probably had to go out of your way to find out about. But either way, I do think the sort of more focused, like, planning it as a trilogy, essentially taking this idea of kids killing each other and turning it into like an actual plot, I think Hunger Games does a very good job at.
So where I felt like the Hunger Games was really strong, taking it as one film, because I've only seen the first. I know that's not entirely fair. I felt like the characterizations were really strong. I really, really liked Katniss this time around. I really liked Peter. I thought their interplay was really fun, and I thought it did a good, because there's a Truman Show element of people, not only does this, barbaric society have a gladiatorial arena where they force literal children to maim each other and kill each other, but it's all televised. Like, I thought the sort of young actor element was really interesting, and them trying to play up an imaginary relationship and having Peter want to live in that fantasy more and her not, I thought was really interesting and fun. Whereas the characters in Battle Royale honestly bored me to tears. I thought Battle Royales was a big joke about like a very poor solution to a nebulous problem.
Well, I think the biggest issue is in order to have a Battle Royale of any kind, you have to have many, many people. Otherwise, it doesn't really make sense. And so then you have to kind of choose whether you want to name all of them in order, like this movie or Battle Royale does, or just be like, okay, here's like the bad guy, and here's like, an ally character, and here are our protagonists. The other ones just kind of die immediately, and we don't, just forget about them.
Sure.
So it's a choice, but it does, I think, make it a lot easier to have a strong character when you go the Hunger Games route.
Right. I thought some of the student moments with Battle Royale were genuinely funny. I mean, I thought part of why it might appeal to a cult audience was because it's not just a slasher. Like, there's some cultural commentary and there's some genuine humor. I felt that some of the characters were parodies of romantic dramas, essentially. Like, what do people do when they're made out, like when they're basically equipped for the wrong genre? What do they do in a slasher? And there are certain characters also that are like, there's the Pussy Galore character whose like mother was, abusive. Basically, she was dealing with child abuse, and so now she's this like ultra proficient murderer, which I thought was kind of stupid. And there are equivalently stupid characters, but when it does try to subvert characters, I find that pretty funny. I think the group of women that nurse Shuya back to health, who end up poisoning each other and eating a bunch of spaghetti. Like on one end, the only mass murder event is perpetrated by women who are squabbling, which is probably like socially a bit like stupid, but also it is kind of funny.
Yeah, well, that was, I think, probably one of my favorite scenes of the movie, and where it gets close to being something better is it's got this element of these girls have kind of like banded together. They're like, look, we're not going to kill each other. That's dumb. We're going to die in 3 days anyway. Whatever. We're just going to like have a nice time. And then all it takes is one guy showing up kind of randomly, and their entire little like perfect society is dead in 5 minutes because of how like mistrusting things can be.
Right.
One of the main things that, what was his name? The guy who was in the previous one that kind of bands together with them. Shuya?
No, that can we just call him Rambo, because I forgot his name too.
I think it's Kawada.
Kawada, okay.
Yeah. Well, so it was Kawada and Kiriyama were the two the transfer students, they called them. That scene I liked because of how it talked about all the mistrusting. That's what it was. Kawada's talking about mistrust the whole time, like whether you can trust somebody in this. And I thought maybe that was going to go somewhere, and it kind of did in that girl scene. But again, there's just a lot of like half arcs or like half finished ideas in it that just kind of, I think, make it feel longer than it is. It's only 2 hours, but it felt longer to me.
I complained about how many characters there were in the Hunger Games last episode, and boy, does Battle Royale have that problem. Yeah, I mean, there are some subversions, and then sometimes when like the film's like, well, we're, out of space or out of ideas, so I guess these people just aren't very interesting to watch.
Yeah, the fact that it felt the need to like say, oh, 3 people died, there's 36 to go or whatever, every time there was a death. Like,
I thought it was sort of interesting in how game like Battle Royale, not just because Battle Royale is a popular game genre, but the movie really felt like it was a game and a thought experiment for a game, in the same way that The Lord of the Flies is a thought experiment. Not to bring in too many properties. We have done 2 properties in the past, not 3. But another point about that book, like that book takes itself very, very seriously. And to Battle Royale's credit, I don't think it takes itself as seriously, even though it's darker subject matter. Hunger Games takes itself really seriously. I think it also mostly succeeds. But had Battle Royale been, the year is 2030, this is what's happening after the bubble economy goes down, take this all seriously, please, I would have checked out in the first 5 minutes.
Okay. So you think it only works as well, or, even as poorly as it does, it works because it's treating itself not seriously?
I don't think it totally works, but I think parts of that movie work because it knows it's stupid and it just wants to get to the meat of the predicament that is, we have 42 students on an island who have to fight to the death. What do they do? That's where the interesting character drama is. How do we get there? I don't think it gets there quite fast enough, but I think the parts of that movie that work for me work because it's silly. When people are turning in each other really quickly, I saw that as a comment on criminality. Here are people who thought they'd never be considered criminals, and they're being treated as criminals. And when they're in their little groups, they're still behaving in the same way. And the girls turn on each other really quickly when something bad happens, and they move to kill each other rather than sort out their problem. And I know this is a little metatextual, but the 99%, I don't know, indictment rate of criminals or something in Japan is really high. And so I drew that connection whether or not it really exists.
I will say that I thought the sort of the rules explanation video, still being that like
that was so
kind
funny
of
to me.
Cutie little girl just being like, okay, remember, this is how you kill people or whatever. I liked that. And I thought it was going to lean more into that angle. But
I was hoping so too.
It just didn't. And it just went to like a sterile, like sort of 4 army dudes in a room kind of thing. Whereas I really thought it was going to be like broadcast, and like they would have like on Japanese television, like actual live Japanese television, where it's got like all the names and stuff flying across the screen every time somebody died, or live betting odds or something like that.
It would have been fun to see the horse track where they were betting on this game. I agree.
Yeah.
And if that idol character, because it reminded me of the AKB-48 like Japanese Defense Force advertisement. Like it felt that dystopian. But if she was present throughout the film, and if we got sort of an outsider's look, I know that's not really part of the structure, and that they're more secretive about this in Battle Royale. It's not televised like Hunger Games, but that was definitely a strength of Hunger Games, and I think that could be a strength of a reimagining of this film.
Yeah, I think it definitely should take elements of Hunger Games if it were to sort of relaunch. Again, no idea what the sequel is about or if
Right.
anybody would want to relaunch Battle Royale. But I think, like you said, it needs to lean in one way or the other. Leaning in too much on the like serious, like this is how the world will devolve angle. Not so much. I think the cartoony kind of slasher elements and like still real comical blood violence or whatever, but like again, like make it a presentation of some kind, because I'm just still so unclear as to how this is supposed to be a punishment act. If the kids, how are you punishing somebody for something they don't know exists?
That to me, and again, this is me trying to just get whatever meaning I can out of the film. It's possible I'm making conclusions that aren't, but the nonsense about it, I thought was a commentary on how people deal with criminals, or look at punishing young people, or the ham-fisted way people try to steer young people's lives. It blown out to obviously the craziest proportions.
Maybe again, there's got to be a lot of cultural context that we're missing for it, because as you said, like it wasn't released outside of Japan for a while, so like maybe there's something more there. But
I do think once they got into the Battle Royale game, even if some of the characters behaved in a disappointing way, I liked how unwavering the rules were. I like that they only got more cruel. There's an issue I have with the Hunger Games that I think robs it of some of its storytelling power a little over halfway through, and that has mostly to do with the society being so brutal, and yet they break their rules during the game twice, whereas they don't ever break their rules in Battle Royale. It really is detestable, and the kids have to come up with a solution that feels earned. Part of Hunger Games didn't feel totally earned to me, even if I thought, again, Katniss and Peter were well-performed characters.
Yeah, well, Katniss kills one person, I believe, throughout the entirety of Hunger Games,
and it's because that person kills a little girl for no reason.
Well, I mean, the reason is they're in the game, but like,
yeah, but it sucks still.
It's just, it didn't really feel like she had to make any hard choices throughout it. And the same kind of thing happens in Battle Royale, right? Like the two sort of lovebirds get to just escape together.
They do, but they aren't set up at the end of the film. And the only reason they escape is because they find, I'm forgetting his name, but Rambo. Like they find a guy who is extremely capable and sympathizes with their problem. And that's the only reason they live. And sure, they're incredibly lucky and that's a stretch, but that dynamic could change and I'd still be happy with the film because the characters are flexible. But you have this tradition that's, let's say, 10 years old in Battle Royale or 1,000 years old in the Hunger Games, and you're making tiny tweaks that clearly fit narrative arcs. That feels less real to me, and that feels like an undercut. It feels like it undercuts the story. I was less invested in the Hunger Games when those two things happened, and nothing about the elimination of certain zones, which is the only rule change like thing that happens in Battle Royale, made me less invested.
So were there any like consequences to there being danger areas? They mentioned it a lot, but like I didn't feel like it ever came up.
I thought they were bombed.
Well, yeah, but like there's never a like consequence of that, right? Well, nobody dies due to there being danger areas. There's no like we have to get out of this zone.
Shuya gets separated, and I believe he spends some time in a danger zone.
Okay.
And that is harrowing because he's not armed, and well, it's not like you can arm yourself against a bomb anyway, but he's like injured and getting away.
I guess I was like more expecting there to be a situation where like the girls have their little lighthouse camp, and then that's a danger zone, and so they have to leave, and that's where trouble strikes or something like that. That just never really seemed to pay off.
Sure. I don't think it was used as effectively as it could have been to apply pressure. I would have rather had there been a systemic reason for like upping the challenge for these characters than the weirdo who escapes a building that's on fire blind and still tries to, kill them all with an Uzi. And that guy doesn't say anything during the film. And you get that he's not a good person, but because he's not a product of the military BR stuff. He's not a product of Katano. He's not the thing that they're essentially trying to thwart. So stopping that guy meant nothing to me. He was just another scene in
just another guy
in a 2-hour film, which at that point, I know in the US and I know Hollywood maybe over polishes things, but it's acceptable to look for things to cut at that point.
Yeah, well, so another, I guess, similarity, right? That kind of likens to in Hunger Games, the kids in like the rich districts, they like volunteer because they're after fame. They train for this kind of thing.
They're trying to be
and this
influencers.
this guy just ends up being more or less a psychotic dude who just likes killing, and it's sanctioned, I guess.
Right. Which
he doesn't have a single speaking line. Is that true? I guess like I don't know where he would have had one.
I think he might have had one at one of the times he guns down like 7 people, but he doesn't say much, and he doesn't say anything that's important to the main characters. He tilted Battle Royale towards exploitation film and slasher to me because he's really just there to enact violence. He doesn't serve much. He helps the plot along. He doesn't necessarily help the themes or the story along.
He's just kind of a menacing creature, which again, slasher film, right? If he's the guy with all the weapons, it seems.
But a focused slasher film would have maybe been about him or the government. It wouldn't have been about both. And to your earlier point, there are a number of elements that don't totally come together. I agree. And I think this is one of them. It's just not totally focused here. It seems, I'm glad they tried some things, and I think some of it's interesting to watch go by, but I don't feel like it holds together in the same way that The Hunger Games does. And I'm frustrated with that movie for different reasons, though I'm less frustrated with that movie.
Yeah, I think it's harder to be sort of mad at Hunger Games when it basically does what it set out to accomplish. And I think Battle Royale also kind of does what it set out to accomplish. It just doesn't really do anything on top of that. They wanted to make a movie about Japanese school kids killing each other. And they did that. They just didn't really make a movie on top of that.
Yeah, I think there's a film there still. I think there's enough content for a film.
There's too much content, in my opinion, but
well, I think it's missing some stuff to be really compelling.
Yeah, well, it's got either too many things, not enough things, or things that need to be rearranged. But the combination that they have didn't quite work.
That said, I did find the ending. I felt like that was a wrap up. Like, I'll watch the second one at some point out of curiosity, but The Hunger Games, even though it's a longer film and it goes by quicker, I felt like that ended more abruptly. Not necessarily on a cliffhanger, but I didn't feel like that was tied up quite as nicely.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's clearly, The Hunger Games is clearly the first act of a trilogy, more so than a self-contained thing. Like, you look at like Star Wars, I think you can pretty easily say that's the end of Star Wars, that's all we have. Or it can also easily lead into more sequels. Hunger Games is clearly, we're not done yet. And Battle Royale is very clearly, okay, they're in hiding.
Yeah, that's the end of the first one. I just like it when films try to do both. I prefer that. So I think I prefer the end of Battle Royale more, and I think I would have liked to know what the characters had thought about their experience more. I also would have liked to know what they would do when really pressed, not just in the survival sense, because I think the film provides a lot of great texture for what that would look and feel like when you're trying to survive out in the wilderness with limited resources and maniacs around you. But I thought it would have been more interesting had the characters had to deal with real dilemmas like only one of us can live. What does that look like? You have characters in Battle Royale confronting that in interesting ways, and you don't have that as much in Hunger Games because people are more pro-violence. And that's okay, but it also means I have less understanding of the rich doofuses characters. I have less understanding of everyone's characters. So you just sort of watch them shoot or sword each other.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really any depth to them, to be sure. They are just the rich kids who have prepared for this. You kind of see them like forming these gangs in Hunger Games. They all know that the gang's not going to like last, obviously, but they still do form those kind of little alliances and things like that.
Which seem like a popularity contest. It seems really high school, and I don't doubt that's one possible outcome, but I didn't find that as interesting.
No, that's fair. There's not much depth to it. It's just kind of you accept it and you move on.
Whereas
I will say I thought the interesting part of sort of the introduction to like what's your starting equipment, because that's always a thing that we talk about for the Battle Royale video game genre is like, what do you start with? How do you get more? In Battle Royale, it's literally just like you get handed a random bag and it could have a pot lid in it for all the good it'll do you, or like some dude gets an Uzi. Whereas Hunger Games, it's like the good stuff is in the middle of this. So if you want to like rush in and like fight for the good stuff, you can get it, or you can just kind of take some food and run away, which I thought was an interesting strategic element to it. What do you think about Battle Royales compared to like like The Purge or something like that.
I haven't seen The Purge, but the Battle Royale movie definitely like reminded me more of that film because I've not really invested any time in that franchise.
Yeah.
Something that turned me off about The Purge was how unrealistic it sounded. But I have, watched some video essays on the subject. I think there was a Wisecracked or something about like, yes, this is silly, but really there's a couple of political points that are actually interesting within the context of an action film. So I'm more game to watch that. And I kept thinking of that film franchise while watching Battle Royale because it seems silly, it seems violent, it seems like a subject that's potentially harder to get involved in. It is child abuse, but apparently there's some interesting, I felt like they got 75% of the way to some interesting points.
Yeah.
And I liked,
I don't know, like,
I thought some of the characterization stuff, I thought like Chigusa taking on that guy who had a crush on her, who was like a weirdo. I thought that was tons of fun.
Yeah, well, there was a lot of little kind of things like that, a lot of like flashbacks in Battle Royale where it's like, oh, these girls locked me in a toilet, so I don't mind killing them, or things like that. And I think, again, the problem is that you can either focus on all of the characters a little bit or some of the characters a lot, and this one kind of chose neither. So you end up with some things that are interesting and then some things that just aren't.
I was happy with half of them. I thought they were all tropey. I thought half of them were subverted, and the half that weren't, I was bored by. I think there's a better film in the concept.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that the idea is cool enough that it spawned so many like different, whether intentionally or not, and influenced directly or not, but the idea and the fact that it's like sort of the word now, the Battle Royale,
right.
It definitely gets credit for that.
I think it's actually like stripped of its cruelty where, if you kill someone in a video game, that's not even really rude, to be honest. Like if an avatar has to sit out a match, that's not even considered rude. Stripped of its cruelty, it is good game design. Maybe that's part of why I found it compelling.
Yeah, and I guess the rules really do make it, right? Like whether the strategy element at the beginning, which we talked about, and well, these are the zones you're allowed to fight in. There's a time limit. There's no like sort of shrinking storm elements.
Right, but they're bombing tiles.
So yeah, you gotta keep moving. You can't just camp out somewhere.
Yeah, I felt like Battle Royale was the story of the Battle Royale, and the Hunger Games is the story of Katniss. I believe that you could be as successful telling the story of the Death Game as telling the story of one likable, hardworking individual, but that's not what happened here.
No. And again, the more time you spend setting up what the Battle Royale is and setting up the rules, setting up like why the people are there, understanding why they're there, their motivations for going or trying to get away from it, all that kind of stuff. The fact that you're telling me it was 25 minutes of before the Battle Royale just seems so weird to me because like only thing I remember is the gas mask on the bus and then the lady on the TV explaining things and him like killing two people before they even get into the Battle Royale.
They spend a lot of time showing you what a sad state of affairs Shuya's life is, how his parents have abandoned him, and how his friend got in trouble by attacking Katana with a knife. New life had handed him some bad cards. That's it. He wasn't really characterized. He played basketball. He quit basketball due to depression. Now it's a death game.
Guitar.
He played guitar while his friend read manga, and he decided to go back to school because the girl he liked said maybe you should consider attending school.
Yeah, just a little bit more needed, and again focusing inward on, and I think really having a true protagonist would help this. There's kind of a protagonist in Shuya, but there's so much time spent away from him, I don't think you could call him a protagonist.
I felt like he was in the same way that Luke Skywalker is an audience stand-in. Like I thought he was an audience stand-in, but things were more heinous in a sense, and he was less capable of approaching the challenges.
Yeah, I don't know, because I feel like he is in sort of the same place as a lot of the other classmates, basically all of them except the two transfer students. So it's not
ones.
it's not like he knows less than we do or less than anybody else really, and it's not like we focus 100% on him and just cut away to see what other people are doing. We are like focusing on basically every student for a large part of the movie.
Most of them are, except for a specific set of times where they're mostly showing off the murderer guy, we're still seeing his perspective through binoculars or something like that. There's the Chigusa scene, which is the lady in the yellow, where it's not from his perspective. And there's like a couple of, I'd say, scene wrap-ups that aren't from his perspective, but a lot of it is his travels through this zone. We only get to see characters that are in his immediate proximity. But maybe if they had stuck one way or the other, it would have been a stronger film, or it'd have a better sense of context. Because even if I think the majority of scenes are done that way. It's not like the whole thing is.
Yeah, well, I was wondering if it would make sense for this to be serialized, or if that would feel like the game is dragging out for too long.
Yeah, so again, my video review, I thought with time with every character in maybe a mini series or something, if everyone were given just as much time as the characters that I liked in order to flesh them out or just make them interesting, if this was maybe 6 hours of content and it was at the same quality, I think I'd be happier with the film. And that's more a thing that can happen nowadays, because it seems like the big productions, a lot are going to seasonal television, primetime television, and not that less is necessarily going to film, but that's not the only avenue. And a lot of adaptations to screen have been more successful when going the miniseries route.
Well, especially if you can even get into a movie theater anytime soon.
Movies still exist, though.
Yeah, but I think big money is probably like if Netflix offers you $100 million up front, you might want to take it. I think so the CW looked to try to get the rights to the name to make a series in 2012. Yeah, so that's like right after big Hunger Games launching of it. So that makes sense, but nothing came of it. Well, yeah, I was just thinking if you had like a bunch of like 30-minute episodes, which all just tried to focus on one character, like a group of characters, and to see if they died or they kind of succeeded a little bit for a while, that would probably tie me more to it.
Sure, they're interesting warlike vignettes that never feel fully explored.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I had an interesting time. I'm glad I've watched it. My opinion of it now is definitely different from what I thought of it when I came into it. My opinion's changed,
for sure.
Essentially, where I really thought it was just going to be slasher horror, sort of exhibitionist, look at these school girls and boys killing each other. And it goes through a lot of effort to make characters relatable and for things to feel heartfelt, which surprised me. I give it an A for effort in that regard.
That's fair. I think it was definitely trying to do not enough for what I would have wanted it to be, but that doesn't mean that like it failed in what it wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, it did make a lot of money. It was really successful,
especially for R15. Yeah,
well,
he
argued with the government a lot on that, and that because he wanted people who were 15 to be able to watch it. I think this was really sympathetic towards young people. I think this was a movie about a man who had seen war and was trying to maybe tell a generation of people that were younger than him, that in some ways he was disconnected from, that they still face challenges, and he understood that. And authority isn't necessarily supposed to be trusted, but also authority doesn't necessarily take your needs seriously. The director was a lot older at this time, and part of why he wanted to take on the project was due to some experiences he had had during World War II. And I just found that dynamic really interesting for a man in his 70s to want to take on a project that's essentially about 15-year-olds and relating to them through horrific stuff, and then so committed to presenting this film to children that he would fight the government on it.
Well, you can, I think, probably understand why the government might have not liked that as much, because I think there were like
I can understand
people reading the
why.
book and like kind of doing acting that out. There's always going to be that fear, right? If it's an instruction manual or not.
Right. I don't know, for situations like this, for kung fu, extreme violence stuff like this, where they're not really spending time with it, they're really just trying to make it look kind of horrific in a schlocky style. I know the governments around the world aren't necessarily the best at determining what's, I guess, fetishizing violence and what's sort of schlocky, but this seemed in schlock for me. This didn't seem hard to stomach.
Well, so there's the scene where the sort of the hacker guys are like basically trying to build a bomb.
Dude, that happens.
It's like, okay,
that happens immediately after all the girls kill each other. It's like boys build shit and the girls just kill each other.
Yep. Well, then the bomb basically just ends up exploding where they are, because I'm just gonna call him Freddy comes in and
Mr. Krueger
kills him. Yeah, but so I wonder, like, when you get into that kind of thing of, this is how you build a bomb, kids. Here are all the ingredients you need, or like this is the best type of blade to like stab somebody in the throat with, or things like that.
I don't think any of that would have made the story better, and
no.
I didn't think they spent any time on that, except for I would prefer to have a bag, not with a pot lid and instead with a real weapon. Right. So I really think this is built like a children's film. How do you feel about it? Do you feel like it isn't? It is? Do you agree with me?
I think that probably as a kid, you wouldn't be as sort of critical on like structure stuff. You'd be more like, what, kids are killing each other, what the hell? And you'd probably be, I think, more into it more quickly, and you wouldn't be as nitpicky as we're probably being. That doesn't mean that I think it's a kid's film in its structure, because again, there's just I don't understand what's happening immediately, versus like a typical kid story would probably be something like the big bad government passes BR Act whatever. Oh no. And then like our class gets kidnapped immediately. And we have to fight.
That literally is my opinion of what happens at this point.
It's just the way it's presented. I just still don't.
A little too confusing to actually follow the film. Okay, that's true.
Too artsy. It needs to be more like Saturday morning cartoon with like an announcer saying like, this is what's happening.
Okay, well.
But again, maybe the cultural context is what I'm missing here.
Let me flip it on you. A lot of people upon its release saw Star Wars as a children's film because of a number of reasons, partially due to seeing maybe sci-fi and fantasy subjects as more of an age down thing. But I don't know. I think in the characters there's some similarities in how their internal lives aren't as well developed, though we enjoy watching their action.
Yeah, there's not enough humor, I think, for it to be really considered that much of a children's film. Battle Royale. Like Star Wars has, like we're following the droids around and there's pauses for laughs.
Less successful, and I'm not saying I would want to show this to children. I don't think so. Just knowing that the director wanted to show this to 15-year-olds and wanted to connect with them, wrote the characters the way they did. The screenwriter wrote this, his brother wrote this the way the person who wrote the book wrote this the way they did, because they're trying to connect with a younger audience. But I think it's a lot less successful than aforementioned Star Wars.
Yeah. Again, I think there's a lot good in Battle Royale. Just the way that it all gets mixed together could be a lot better.
Yeah, I'd like to see some other people take a crack at it, and I wonder how strong the translation of the book is, if there is one available. I assume there is, but that's not always a given.
Yeah, I'm sure you could probably find something at this point, given how much of a cult classic it is and how long it has been out.
You'd hope so. Maybe it structurally works. There have been a couple of times where I've read the book after seeing some OVAs, original video animations from Satoshi Kon, and I have been really disappointed because he essentially takes people's ideas and then makes sure to think on them harder than they did before presenting an end product.
Well, and there's also things that just sort of make sense in a book that don't in a movie or vice versa. Like a lot of internal narration is very hard to translate to a movie. Right. So whether like the characters are thinking about stuff or not might help, might hurt. Hard to say.
Yeah. Anyway, a weird movie. I don't regret watching it, but I'm really not going to watch it again unless a close friend wants to have that experience with me,
Sometime in the future, your kid's like, Dad, what about this old movie, Battle Royale?
Dad, I'm also a weeb. Wouldn't that be a good fantasy, huh? They're gonna my kids are gonna be into something else, probably. I don't know. Video games are
rebel and be like German weebs or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm gonna go learn about trains, or I'm gonna remember every single European soccer club, something like that.
All the leagues.
Yeah,
I only do third tier British soccer leagues. That's the only thing I follow.
I only do betting on Barcelona. I don't know. I can't even phrase this. Manchester United.
There you go. They're a team. Anything else about Battle Royale or Hunger Games? We basically focus mostly on Battle Royale, I think, but that's fine.
Well, Hunger Games
less to talk about, I think, in Hunger Games.
Is a lot. There's a lot I liked about it. There are some things that I don't. I really liked the survivalism elements here. I found in the filmmaking itself, I thought that the direction for the action was somewhat weak at times. There are a lot of effects in the film that don't quite sell it, and I'm not just trying to be a snob about CGI, but there are entire sequences that are mostly slow-mo, and they don't have a slow-mo camera handy. So here's someone who hasn't really thought through their action in making the film. It's a little bit disappointing because the majority of it is sort of this high-quality Hollywood look, and the score is
very
well
high
done.
budget.
Yeah, big budget, great performers, and to a certain degree, even the most successful films currently in Japan from now or 20 years ago, they've got smaller budgets, so the effects are usually not as big a part of it. It's less of a spectacle. Battle Royale certainly falls in that bucket, but I was a little disappointed to see that there were some elements that were clearly directly translated from the book, like their garb being on fire in the chariot scene where they're being introduced to the council, and having it just be like some VFX artist who goes like, okay, well, I've got this flame and I'm just going to sort of draw it from their back, like rather than coming up with an inventive solution that I would have felt I had seen in whatever HBO series eventually gets made out of this property, where they come up with maybe this is more metaphorical metaphorically presented. Maybe this is like rooted more in the context of something rather than a direct translation. And in a similar thought, I really hated how they dressed in the Fancy Pants Society when I first saw this film. And this time I loved it because I know you're supposed to think, one, we're like 8 years away from it initially being released. So it's not like everyone's going to be wearing the most in trend stuff right now anyway. But they're supposed to seem foreign and weird to you. They're more weird than the Dust Bowl characters.
It clearly puts you in a sense that like this is a new place. This is not something that these characters have seen before, that the audience has seen before. Whereas Battle Royale is like, well, this is kind of our world somewhat, and it's mostly the same. They're all wearing their like, you know, classic Japanese schoolgirl uniforms.
Right.
But
yeah, there's not an effort to contextualize the society around the game. Whereas the Hunger Games, it goes to really great lengths to do that. And it sacrifices, I think, some character, and I think the end is sacrificed, but it really shows you a strong starting point. I liked how strange it was entering that world. I felt like it was really alien as these people's lack of empathy.
Exactly. And you sort of you immediately understand what these people are about from looking at them. One of the best early scenes in Hunger Games is when Katniss is like trying to show off her skills for these people to try to get sponsors or whatever. And they're just completely ignoring her, just drinking whatever thing they're doing. And then she just shoots the arrow like right at their like hand or whatever. Thank you for your consideration.
She shoots, and I just know this because I watched it yesterday. She shoots the apple out of a pig's mouth.
Yeah.
So great imagery, very fun watching Jennifer Lawrence say really hard shit to a bunch of
little curtsy
pieces of us. Yeah, doing a little curtsy. Thank you for your consideration.
Yeah.
God, if there was a Florida Man report where someone just iced some dude and there was a recording somehow of thank you for your consideration, like that would keep me up at night.
Some dude like going after somebody like wearing a mask, and he's just like, nah, can't have this.
Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your consideration.
Yeah, that is the good night, sweet prince of the Hunger Games. It is extremely good.
It's very good. And yeah, just the imagery matching the characterization, I think a very good thing to nail. Talk about Star Wars a lot, it would seem, but you look at Darth Vader, you immediately get it. Just first scene with the stormtroopers and him, you understand the Hunger Games people a lot. And I think it kind of even works in Battle Royale, where you have the soldiers and then the teacher just kind of in a normal attire next to them.
Like he's not even a normal attire. He's in loungewear. I mean, he's wearing like an Onitsuka Tiger like tracksuit or something. It just, he's lazy and aimless. Yeah.
He is kind of fallen off the wagon, and he's clearly the person in charge because he's the only one not dressed like the military, but they're all looking at him. You just get it immediately. It transcends dialogue.
And I mean, I think that's a good way of costuming, even when you can't necessarily design really specific world costume. But the Hunger Games, I thought even the costuming of the riot suppression force was interesting because they kind of look like stormtroopers, but they actually relate more to our world's riot police. And I thought,
it's more of an evolution.
I thought it was interesting seeing what would be considered rioting portrayed in that light. I know the morality of everything in the Hunger Games is a lot easier to suss out, and a lot of people, no one's going to consider that contentious. Don't kill kids, obviously. I would argue there's some mirroring of that in the United States and around the world, but I think it's drawn out simply enough. A lot of people are gonna really feel that even while watching those scenes. But I thought it was almost transgressive in some ways. I thought the Hunger Games maybe was pushing things further, especially in a film oriented towards young people who might not be politically active, harder than I had previously given it credit for.
Well said.
What was that?
Just well said.
Oh, thank you. I was worried you said, what was that?
Oh.
not out of my ego, out of that's my audio technician talking.
Technological challenges of running an online podcast.
Yeah, but there have been student protesters in Asia who use the Mockingjay sign, which I just think is like a little interesting thing, bringing it into the real world. Like the symbolism of this is used elsewhere in a way that like the Star Wars Rebels symbols aren't.
Yeah, I guess it's something you can do with your hands, right? You don't have to like slap an image on a wall or something. So
that may be part of it. I mean, it may be ease of being able to make that. I just think that's something interesting and something compelling specifically about this franchise. Maybe that's an appeal that's specific to this one.
I think when you put anything in context, it's easy to sort of see how well it would go over.
It's numerology.
How popular it is.
There's 3 fingers, 3 Hunger Games movies.
There was actually 4 because they split the third one.
There's There's
the
4
two.
Hunger Games movies. I think there's 3 monotheistic gods in Christianity. It's a numerology.
Numerology. This is like the number 23. Maybe that's the one we should watch.
Sure.
Never seen that movie.
What movie?
Number 23.
Okay.
It's a Jim Carrey. It's one of Jim Carrey's dramedy movies.
Oh, is it good?
Again, haven't seen it.
Haven't seen it. Okay, want to judge for yourself. So speaking of, on your 5-point scale, if you feel like you've spent enough time with these properties, what do you think the Hunger Games ranks as compared to all the other films you've seen?
I think Hunger Games is a pretty solid 4 out of 5 for me. Not perfect, but something I rewatch, mainly because my wife likes it a lot. But we'll rewatch those every couple of years for sure. They're just very digestible, good action, not great action, but good characters, not great characters, all the way through. It's just everything is very, very solid. And when you have a lot of solid things together, that elevates that to a 4 for me. Whereas Battle Royale is like, it's right between a 2 and a 3. I think I give it a 3 just for like the novelty of the idea, but I wouldn't watch it again. Not because of like any sort of grotesqueness, just because like I don't really feel like rewatching it would get me anything.
Yeah, I wish there were more to read out of that movie, because I think I'd find that in and of itself enjoyable, but I was really struggling with whether or not I wanted to give this a 2 or a 3, because the first film I reviewed on YouTube, I gave a 2, but I like that movie a lot. I just think it has some issues as a film. And Battle Royale, I think, is more successful and more watchable, some of what it wants to do, but I have like less interest in ever watching that movie again. I just don't think there's that more readings I'm going to get more readings out of it. I did give it a 3. I don't know that I totally love that still. Like I'm going to stick by it because I think it comes together a little better, but Hunger Games I like more. I think I would give Hunger Games also a 3, but I like it a lot. And Battle Royale, I begrudgingly give a 3, maybe a 2. I don't like it. Like I think there are some winning moments in Battle Royale that are more compelling in ways that surprised me and that brought me joy, but I don't like the overall product.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair summary of both of them. It matches mine quite a bit.
Well, it sure is good that you and I have the same exact opinions, because otherwise there would be something to discuss. We're thinking Master and Commander next time. What? I don't know what we pit that against.
I mean, I don't know if it necessarily needs anything to be pitted against, but could probably find a similar boat movie.
Do we want to go similar time period?
To go like Wellington, maybe?
I only know what a Wellington is in regard to the beef.
It's a movie about the Napoleonic Wars.
Okay. Maybe, so is Master and Commander like a war film?
Well, so it's like ostensibly about a guy who commands a boat trying to track down a ship that hit their boat or something.
Okay.
But it's really more about life on a boat.
Okay.
And like all those types of things.
Hard living.
Yeah.
On a boat. Gosh, this film sounds like really to get to know what it is about, you actually have to watch it. It seems like it may be more about the complexities of life, and I don't have a genre pull in my head ready for that.
No, it would be difficult to come up with one, which is why I think we should do Waterworld. That'd be funny.
Okay, we'll do Waterworld, dude.
They're both boats.
It's gonna be 2 podcasts in one recording, essentially. I'm not gonna split them up either. It's just gonna be like, so Master and Commander, what a great film. What a wonderful performance from Russell Crowe. And then you know how Kevin Costner bombed his whole career with this terrible game or film, and it actually has a tie-in game on Virtual Boy, which is so perfect.
That's just success all the way around.
Yeah, it really is a winner. I think we've got our plan for next episode, which I think would be interesting to include in this one. Are there any final conclusions? Is there anything more you wish you could see from either of these films that we haven't discussed? Is there something that you think is special about one of these films? Is there a component from one of these films that you think could be used in another film or franchise?
Well, I think the best thing to take away from this would just to simply be that Battle Royale, the things that I wish it kind of did, has been explored so much that it didn't need to do it itself, right? We have whole genres of games on that now. We briefly mentioned like it kind of has spin-offs in the fact that there's like these Purge movies, there's Assassination Nation, all these kind of like things that take the idea and try to do different things with it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be kids doing it, but just that sort of concept. So I think in that way, Battle Royale succeeds immensely just by having a legacy, which Hunger Games, I'm more or less convinced that people are like, yeah, that was good, and have more or less forgotten about it. So
yeah, I guess that is sort of sad about the Hunger Games. I guess there was like Divergent or something, or Maze Runner.
Yeah,
it's sort of
Maze
maybe
Runner,
people trying to
Divergent.
cash in on it, but not really.
Well, that's more book
thoughtfully
related too,
right?
like because the books did well, and so people started copying the books, and then when the movies made money, they copied the movies.
Oh no! What'll happen when Ubisoft finally licenses one of these?
Yeah, where's the Ubisoft Battle Royale game? Do they have one?
It's called it's EA Rocket Arena. I don't remember. I think they have one. I think it's Hyperscape.
Hyperscape. That sounds right.
I think yes, like the gameplay has been literally explored. What disappoints me is I don't necessarily need them to be children. And yes, I think if this concept were ever explored in the US, that might be a no-go for a $100 million film. And yeah, I can understand that. I do sympathize with the business people trying to make that case. But I
mean, at the end of the day, they're trying to make money. Like,
right.
And that's probably not going to do well unless you really try to tie into the Cold Battle Royale name.
You think the Fortnite movie is going to explain the philosophy behind this?
Where does the battle bus come from?
Where does it come from? Well, what I wanted to get to was I am kind of disappointed because I think, okay, the violent framework and like discussing the morality of murder within a sort of political slasher like The Purge, sure, that's a legacy. But I really strongly feel like there was some interesting stuff specific to this film that wasn't totally successfully explored. And I would want someone with a better pickaxe to go down to the same mine. I just don't know when that's going to happen or if it's going to happen. And that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, you don't get everything that you want, but I would like stuff specific to this. I'd like to see someone explore this more fully.
I mean, the movie being reintroduced as a TV show like a decade or two later definitely happened. So I'm sure by 2040 you will have seen something with the name Battle Royale.
Okay. Whether or
given
not
how unoriginal most of these things are these days, it's all just taking old ideas and trying to make them better. So it'll happen.
I have a great idea for an impromptu segment. Okay. Who would you recast Kitano as, and why would it be Dan Aykroyd?
Like literally Dan Aykroyd just trying to speak Japanese the entire movie. Oh no! You don't change a single thing.
That would be fantastic, but also I could just see him waving around a gun at kids in a convincing way.
Yeah. Well, I guess Ender's Game was kind of also softly compared to Hunger Games.
Right.
But like old Harrison Ford just showing up for a paycheck in that role, that'd also be pretty great.
I like that movie a lot more than I think most people did, but I also really like the books growing up. I don't agree with Orson Scott Card or his church's politics, but I do believe he's a very strong sci-fi writer.
Can, have opinions that are different and still write good media. I appreciate the art, not the artist.
I regularly like stuff from people who are, I don't agree with in that way.
That's fine.
It's something that's an important component to my criticism.
Fair enough.
Is there someone you'd like to recast in either film? Do you think Woody Harrelson was successful?
I actually thought Woody Harrelson did a great job in Hunger Games. Really sold the role of that, like, basically guy who escaped poverty and just kind of has to be there so he doesn't get fined.
Yeah.
And then he kind of he grows throughout the movies to become not like a leader of the resistance, but like a member of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I got to watch more of these movies, man, because I like that movie. I thought the game design was kind of lacking. There's this Pixar story rule, which is random, like, bad things can happen to your protagonist, but random good things can't, because that feels like cheating. And I felt like there are a couple of random good things, whether or not one company's framework applies to every type of story. It did feel like there was some God in the machine going on in the Hunger Games, but I'm still excited to see more.
Yeah, it's kind of addressed in the sponsor thing, but there was definitely, I remember criticism when it came out, like, how did PETA get his like makeup tools or whatever?
Oh,
like, the
things that bothered me, I like the sponsorships. I like the loot drops. Those are good. I like them in Fortnite. I like them in PUBG. I like them here. What bothered me was them going, oh, 2 people can win. And then going, oh, they're actually monster dogs now.
Well, the monster dogs I thought were sort of planned from the beginning as like a, a final boss type conclusion. But the 2 people winning thing was weird. Like, I don't believe that that's never happened before. Like 2 people from the same district fell in love, or even just 2 other people fell in love and didn't want to kill each other.
If it's such an institution,
there had to have been another case of like that happening in 74 of these things.
What I didn't like about the dogs, and I actually didn't like something similar in dealing with Rue, even though I thought mostly, she's a nice girl. Obviously, Katniss doesn't want to kill somebody, but she does feel kind of like an accessory. When she's dying, she tells Katniss, you have to win this. Not, I love you or I like you or I'm glad you're my friend and I hope you win this. Like that really felt like, okay, writer talking to audience rather than character expressing thought to Katniss. And when they brought those evil dog things in and Katniss says, it's the finale. Yes, that's badass. That's incredibly badass. Thank you, Jennifer Lawrence. But also it's maybe if your character was afraid of the scary thing, it would draw me more into your dilemma than, I know what those are already.
I think that's reasonable. I would say that Rue giving our protagonist a quest update more or less as she died is kind of weird.
Because she doesn't have a lot of screen time, even though most of that time she's really likable. It was just disappointing when it's like, okay, are we really considering what the character would say here?
Yeah.
Is the horse dead enough?
I think so.
Okay.
I think it's been killed.
Well, thank you so much for joining me in this possibly bi-weekly horse beating of film.
We'll try to keep it to films over 2 decades old as much as possible.
There were spoilers in this one, huh? This is Will from Will's Game Talk. Thank you for joining us for the Deathmatch Cinema podcast. I am joined by my friend and colleague.
Link. I host Tubbin and Chuggin on YouTube as well. You can check that out. If you like my thoughts on things that aren't films, you can go check out my thoughts on various alcohols over there.
Yeah, so I am games and sometimes movie content. Will's Game Talk on TikTok and YouTube. So thank you very much for joining. Have wonderful weeks, if not bi-weeks, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.